Welcome to another community episode of my Observability Clinics, number 12 already. Today, best practices on JavaScript in the Dynatrace platform. And we have a repeating guest. Ajay, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, yeah. How's it going, Andy?
All good. I'm really excited that you keep coming back to me with tips and tricks. And today we're talking about JavaScript, which I know is powering a lot of the cool stuff we have in our new platform. JavaScript can be used in many different ways, whether it's in a notebook, in a dashboard, when you build your own apps. But I don't want to steal your thunder because I think you've prepared a lot of things for us.
Yeah, exactly. So with the Dynatrace platform, we've empowered our developers in general to be able to kind of take their skills and apply it to the Dynatrace observability platform. So now all the data is at developers' expense. They can do what they need to do. How do they need to visualize the data with JavaScript? And we'll kind of take a look at where in the product they'll be able to do that in terms of dashboards, like you said, workflows. So what are we going to look at? Yes, how does JavaScript make itself visible in the Dynatrace platform regarding dashboards, notebooks, workflows, and then specifically looking at the CodeTile in dashboards, and then finally the JavaScript task in workflows. Obviously, the entire app engine, automation engine is built on top of JavaScript and TypeScript. However, this is where, as an end user, you can consume and apply your skills on the observability data.
And so also what I like about this, right? And we are building our capabilities into the Dynatrace platform, just as you can extend the platform with the same mechanisms, whether it's you build a custom app, whether it's you build a custom JavaScript that runs in all these components, because you, with this, have the option to build any type of use case on top of the data that we have in our platform, that's in Grail, that's available through all the other APIs. And also, I think you will show us something about also pulling in external data and then really getting Dynatrace to be the platform where you can then analyze, become a data analyst. And I think JavaScript, as you said, plays a big role. Really cool.
Yes, exactly. Yep. So yeah, just looking at JavaScript in general, obviously it's a scripting language that's widely used in the Dynatrace platform. We've used it to enhance the experience that you as a user of Dynatrace, the platform, are perceiving, as well as empowering you to then flex on the observability data. Either that's the data that's being collected or externally, and then empowering that data with the Dynatrace platform. And we'll look at where JavaScript plays a role in the Dynatrace platform. Starting with the CodeTile. So in the dashboard and notebook app, we can now add a tile, which is going to be running JavaScript code. And in this scenario, I have a use case where I have an external API REST endpoint where it provides JSON data. This is kind of what the JSON looks like. There's some dummy data here about notes for to-dos. We can apply some JavaScript on that to reach out to that URL, fetch it, and then return the results of the to-dos, and then visualize that in a dashboard.
And sorry for asking a question, but this is a great use case where I know we work with a lot of people that have external data somewhere around, right? And whether this is, let's say, a static list of things that allows you then to get, let's say, logical names to entities, because I think this is a common use case that I hear. I say, hey, in Dynatrace, I have certain values or certain entities, but they only have like an internal ID, and I would like to, instead of the internal ID, actually provide a more meaningful human readable name, which we have in a different system. So with this, you can pull in external data and then make it available in Dynatrace, right? And it's very easily done.
Yeah. Exactly. And then again, with the CodeTile, you have access to all the observability data using some of the framework SDKs. So that means you can take your external data, query and the data stored on Grail, and then merge the two together using JavaScript. So that opens up quite a lot of avenues in terms of use cases.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have another example where instead of a more dynamic REST API endpoint, we're dealing with a CSV file.
Mm-hmm.
So again, here's that dummy CSV data that's available via a URL endpoint. There's some JavaScript where I needed to convert that to JSON to make it usable within the visualization piece, and then we can visualize CSV data. So any static data, you can apply JavaScript to convert it to JSON, and then once it's in JSON, it's fairly easy to then visualize for you.
Mm-hmm. That's a cool, thank you for that as well, because I know CSV is very common out there, and
Sure. Yep.
Great to just see how easy that is now with JavaScript as well, just convert it.
Yep. And then there's a little bit about the JavaScript runtime that is supported in Dynatrace. There's some key functions that, like the date function, the math function in JavaScript, that's also supported. So you don't have to bring additional modules into your JavaScript code. That's all supported at runtime. So you have access to those key components of JavaScript. And then there's the SDK that Dynatrace provides, which is going to expose some of the internal functionalities of the Dynatrace platform, like the ability to access Grail via DQL through the query client. There's access to the Dynatrace APIs as well. So there's quite a lot of SDKs, and we'll look at the developer portal that we support, or that exposes all this information. And then there's some example JavaScripts that you can copy and paste into your code. So that should do it for the CodeTile. We're going to jump into workflows. Looks like I messed up on the naming there. Looking at JavaScript task. Again, a task and a workflow is going to be a unit of work in that workflow. So you can have a workflow that has multiple tasks. And now that there is a JavaScript task in the workflow, that just opens up the amount of use cases. I'll just kind of walk through these here. So yes, now that you can run your own JavaScript code in a workflow, you have unlimited access in terms of the possibilities that you have with that observability data. You can have workflows that are going to run JavaScript to reach out to these external endpoints, to extract data, process that data, and then based on the processing of that data, take actions. That action could be to send a notification or reflect on the results of that processing, create a problem ticket, whatever avenue that you need to take to be notified of. Workflows support that avenue.
I just to give you another example that I just saw from one of our customers. They have a workflow that is triggered by a problem. Let's say process is kind of running high CPU or is about to crash, and so they have this workflow that is basically triggered if this happens, if a process is kind of about to die. And then what they do, they actually execute an external pipeline that can actually restart the process, right? So because some of these systems, they run in some different locations. And so what they basically do, they have a workflow, and then through custom JavaScript, they make a call, in their case, to their Azure DevOps pipeline by telling that pipeline that a particular process needs to be restarted on a certain machine, because this is just how they've set up the environment. They're using pipelines to not only deploy, but also to restart services. And what they also do in JavaScript, they are first querying additional information about that process itself. Who does it belong to, right? Who's the owner of this? And then also send out notifications to these teams to make sure that they're informed about their process being restarted through a pipeline because it ran high on CPU, for instance. So really cool.
Yeah, exactly. So the JavaScript task fits a gap that used to exist where previously you had to extract this the observability data outside of Dynatrace, write some external scripts to then do what you need to do with that data. But now that's all built into the Dynatrace platform. So it makes it that much easier to automate your tasks. And then I think that should do it for the deck. Going into the PowerPoint. I did create a set of dashboards utilizing some of the JavaScript examples that I showcased. I do want to start with the Dynatrace Developer Portal. That's kind of where you can get started regarding how to implement or utilize or apply JavaScript across the many tiles. Specifically here we have a description of the JavaScript runtime and some of the supported packages that come with the JavaScript runtime. So these are packages that you don't need to then import. These are all already readily available. And then that includes the SDKs. So again, these are services that the Dynatrace platform is making use of in the apps that we provide, as well as services that you can easily extract or you make use of using JavaScript. So that means anything to do with the Dynatrace APIs, you can use the SDK for the individual APIs to then extend your JavaScript. There's the automation engine, SDKs to make use of the functions of the automation engine. This is going to be useful in the workflows themselves. There's quite a lot of documentation here about the SDKs and the JavaScript runtimes that applies in the Dynatrace platform.
Also, I think the ad hoc utils, and I think they're also really helpful. I think the first one in the list, right? As you said, there's a lot of things in there that allow you to do just helper functions. I think are really important, and units, navigation. Yeah, I mean some of them are, I think, as you said, apply when you build an app, and some of them are relevant for when you build some custom JavaScript for dashboards, notebooks, and workflow tasks. Yeah, but really great. So this is a great way to get started here. Yeah, let's get an overview.
Exactly, and then good to point out that the authentication regarding the APIs, the classic environment V1 and V2 APIs, the authentication is already done for you because you're running this within the context of the dashboard app, which has very specific policies that are assigned to you, and then by default, the policies apply to the code that you're running if you're using these SDKs. But it's very nice to know that. Okay, so just good to know the developer portal exists, and it's very useful to understand when you're looking at JavaScript, the app engine, anything to do with automation engine as well. Looking at some of the examples here, the first example is running some JavaScript where we are using or making use of some external, or in this case, hard-coded data, as well as the SDK for querying Grail through the client query for DQL. So we're taking the static data and applying that static data against DQL here to get some results from DQL. And then from there, we're processing that data so that when we visualize it, we see the results here. So in this case, we're taking static external data, making use of the DQL to then query that data, and then run some custom JavaScript to make sense of that data or the analysis that I'm trying to do on this data, and then present it here in Dynatrace.
So just to recap, what you're doing here is, in this particular example, getting an overview of how many DDUs were consumed by a certain, let's say, team, right? This is data that they query through DQL. And then you basically fetch data, let's say, from an external source that tells you how expensive a DDU is. And then you basically then combine the total cost. I think that's also really
Exactly. Yep. Yeah. So understanding DDU consumption across teams based on the usage per team member. Yep.
Yeah. I've seen a similar example would be if you have the data in Dynatrace about how many EC2 machines or any type of cloud vendor you have, right, and how long they're running, and then you could query the cost API from, let's say, AWS, to then say how much does it cost to run this particular type of EC2 machine, and then in Dynatrace you can say, and this team has that many machines on this type, and this is the total sum of the costs. So that's really cool.
Yeah, that's a great another example of the same kind of cost analysis breakdown. In this example, we're just creating our own data in JavaScript, some example time series data. So just in this case, just showing off that you can run JavaScript to make use of some of these built-in functions like the date function, the math function. These are all available at JavaScript runtime. You can make use of those to generate your own data sets. If you need to run some dummy data, you can generate that in JavaScript yourselves and then visualize that however you need to visualize it here in the CodeTile.
And so also just to understand, because this is interesting for me from the code perspective, what a function needs to do, it simply needs to return an array of objects, and the objects are just JSON objects like you have here, a timestamp and value. And then your code here, it seems, creates a sample count of 120 records, and you're just using, you know, some randomization or with just multiplied by pi. Yeah, that's awesome.
Exactly. Yeah. So it needs to be an array of some dictionary with key value pairs, and the CodeTile is able to understand that to visualize that as records. You can also potentially run DQL here to do something with this data outside of just generating it to actually analyze it. But yeah, it's definitely kind of the way to go.
Yeah, but for me, it's good to know that if you want to visualize some output of JavaScript that is returning data, the only thing you really need to do is return an array of JSON objects, and then the notebook here or the dashboard will automatically visualize it or give you visualization options as if this would be data coming from a metric query or a log query.
Exactly. Yep. And then that example where we're looking at static data. So I have an endpoint here that returns a CSV file. I ingest that CSV file. I run some JavaScript to convert that CSV file into a JSON for me. Once it's a JSON, I can apply some conditions on that JSON and then finally add that into a query. So here I have built a query that's going to be running against DQL, where I'm using the data function of DQL to say I have some data that's going to be in the format of a JSON. And then I can make use of all the functionality of DQL once I have that data. So now I have a scenario where I'm adding a new field to my data based on the team and position of players, and then summarize that data to give me the count of players, the average age, the average weight and height of all those players by the new field I created. So this shows you exactly how you can take external data, empower it using DQL to analyze your data, and then finally result that in a dashboard like this here. So now we have CSV data, right? If I wanted to, that would probably download it, but right, you have some comma separated items, which is going to be your CSV data. We're now making that data and analyzing it so that we're getting value from the data, not only just visualizing it for you here. Now we can see across the different teams, the different positions, quickly what's the average age, weight, and height. So this gives you an idea of how powerful the JavaScript can be when you're trying to get value out of the data that you have in a CSV file.
So a couple of things you show here, which I really like, is that the example shows how you can you scroll up again to the example?
Sure.
You basically show that on the top, you can use the fetch command to actually query any type of data through a REST API that is reachable from an HTTP call. The second thing is you are then converting this data into JSON, and the reason why you do this is because you are using a feature of DQL where instead of executing a DQL against your live data, you can also just give the DQL parser, right, a data set with the data option, and then just apply it. And then you also show in the very bottom that you can then execute this query just by using the query execution client. That's awesome. Yeah, that's
exactly. So yeah, we're using the value of the platform to apply it to our external data here.
Very cool. Yeah.
And then similarly, we have REST API endpoints that's presenting us with dynamic JSON data. We're taking that data, applying some DQL again to it to make the data valuable in terms of the analysis, and then returning that here as well. So it's empowering our data analytics within the platform itself. Again, all this would have had to been externally with some external script to then take the data from Dynatrace, external sources, process it, and then potentially send it back to Dynatrace. But now none of that has to happen because the platform itself supports it.
Quick question. On the top, you have parameters or variables in the dashboard, right? And you can also reference those in your JavaScript functions?
Exactly. I do that in this tile here. So I have some dynamic variables that I am using in my JavaScript. So in this case, again, looking at the cost analysis, I want to, if I look at the tile again, I am presenting with a field, the cost alert field, and dynamically based on the cost alert I set here in the tile, I can adjust what's returned in the data. So the variables that are presented to you here in the dashboard are also not only usable in the Markdown or in DQL, but can also be used in JavaScript too. And you can simply reference it with the $sign like this.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so this is a good example of dynamically adjusting the costs alert for this cost analysis. Good, I guess, as you're analyzing or writing JavaScript, a good thing to know that is you can use the console log, and as you write your code, this will actually run log out to this log component here, so you can see what you're doing as you're writing the JavaScript. So if you're getting stuck in any place, simply console log whatever you're dealing with, and it'll give you an idea of what you've done so far.
That's cool. Yeah, that's great, and also obviously for troubleshooting and that's perfect. Yeah.
And there's been some improvements to the actual JavaScript code here, where it now provides some syntax and some conditionals that validate actual JavaScript code. So it's made it a lot easier to actually write the code itself and troubleshoot it. So that takes us to the JavaScript task and workflows. So I built out a workflow that's using one of the examples where we have some CSV data. So again, here is a workflow where we're getting CSV data from an external source. And then we have a task that gets the data, a task that processes that data against DQL, and then finally tasks that sends the results of that processing out to Slack. So again, this JavaScript here is going to extract that CSV data into a JSON format. It's going to pass it along in this dictionary where the key result points to that data JSON. And then on our next task, we're using the query execution client the execution of the automation utils SDK to get the results here in this exe variable. And in the results, we'll get the results of the previous task. And then from that previous task, we know that the results are in the key result. And then once we have it, we can pass it to we now have access to that previous data. And then we're running it against Grail. And then there's a step where we're creating a dictionary where we have the T markdown and team analysis markdown. And then in our next steps, we can access that data like this. So based on the task called DQL analysis, which is this one here, return the results where the key is team analysis markdown. And then similarly, we have the team markdown. So now when I run this, it's going to run the JavaScript. It's going to do the next tasks, and then finally send it off to Slack. And if I open up Slack here, I now have the results of my workflow where it's where we're analyzing that SCSV data. I'm returning some valuable information, at least to me, regarding the average, the highest average age, weight, and height across all the teams, and then a breakdown of all the data on average. So very quickly, you can take your CSV static data, apply some workflows to it so that you're analyzing and returning valuable information of that data. And in this case, I'm sending it to myself on Slack.
That's pretty powerful. And I think, can you do me a favor and go back to one of these workflow functions or tasks, the JavaScript, like any of those? Sure. So just for the understanding, again, you can write any type of JavaScript in here, but really what gets executed is the default function. That's the one that gets executed. It gets the execution ID, which means it can actually, again, use the same SDK to query even more information about the execution itself, what type of workflow it runs in. I guess it also then has access to any type of data that triggered that workflow. In your case, you triggered it manually, but a workflow can obviously be triggered through a schedule or through an event. So you have also full access to all the context. And then it's, again, just JavaScript, and every task can then either, if it fails, I guess, obviously this is where then the workflow then branches off into conditional execution. But if it succeeded, it returns, again, a JSON object, and this can then be accessed by all the subsequent tasks again. That's exactly, yeah. Yes, yeah. And maybe one last thing to this, because I think you're building some really cool things here, and I'm pretty sure people that will watch this will say, hey, there's certain tasks that I may want to not use once, but maybe multiple times. Do I need to then kind of, copy and paste it all the time? I think this is where apps will also come in, because Dynatrace apps can then also expose tasks. And so instead of calling, I guess, JavaScript, you can then just also call, like you call a Slack task here, you could then just call a task that is exposed by your custom app that provides particular tasks that are specific to your business needs.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, empowering a app with this functionality so that the app itself supports the use cases that you're trying to get out of workflows or the dashboards, definitely.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think
I have one more question for you. So people that might not be that familiar with JavaScript and TypeScript, I think on the developer portal, we also give some hints on where to learn JavaScript and just about some best practices in general. But there's so many courses out there, right? There's so much information out on the internet. In case you're not familiar with JavaScript, it's super easy to actually get started. A lot of examples overall, right? Or everywhere.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, like you said earlier, we'll put this dashboard out on a GitHub link so that you can have some examples to work with. And you should be able to just import it into your own Dynatrace environments and start running it and seeing how it works and playing around with it. I think end of the day, the JavaScript in the Dynatrace platform empowers you to now apply maybe an unlimited amount of use cases to the observability data as well as external data, and empowering your observability data with that data. And I think it's just about getting together, identifying those use cases, maybe aligning with your business needs. You'll definitely find more use cases as you align with the business. That'll definitely empower some of the use cases and the dashboards and workflows that you are creating.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I learned a lot because I saw a lot of great examples, and I always like to copy and paste from other examples. And so as you make the dashboard available, folks, you can just import this, and then you can see all these examples for yourself, and then, you know, start from there, and then build on top of that, get to know the power of Dynatrace in the context of JavaScript. Awesome. Yeah. Hey, with this, I want to say thanks again for doing another session. I'm sure this is not the last one, because I know you're working with Dynatrace users on a day-to-day basis, and these are all best practices and tips and tricks that come out of your work with our community. So thank you so much for sharing them.
Yeah, of course. You're welcome, Andy, and I appreciate it. And it gives me an opportunity to showcase kind of what I've learned and make sure that you're not having to relearn these things. Definitely. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. Until next time. Bye-bye.
Until next time. Bye.